Today, we finally got an in-depth breakdown as to how combat is going to be working in the upcoming leagues. I'm going to break this down as quickly as possible. Before we get started, though, I do want to give a shout out to the channel members. This is actually a massive way that you can support the channel because everything made from the members goes directly back into upping the quality and production of things around here. So if you're interested in getting a shout out at the start of each video, as well as some badges that level up the longer you're a member, and even some custom emotes for when we go live, consider joining today. But let's go ahead and jump on into it here. They say you'll be able to spend combat mastery points to unlock powerful style-focused abilities. You'll earn combat mastery points by completing the assigned tasks. You'll earn up to a total of 10 combat mastery points, and each ability requires the previous tier of that style to be unlocked. You'll also unlock a passive buff as you reach each tier for the first time. These passive buffs apply to all styles. They give us a list here of tasks that we'll be able to use in order to earn these combat mastery points. I'm not sure if this is a static task list. It kind of looks like it is. Let's go ahead and read through this. You'll earn a combat mastery point for defeating a giant, for defeating 10 monsters with a combat level of over 100, for defeating Scurious by yourself, for defeating a monster with a Slayer requirement of over 55, for defeating Jad inside of the fight caves, as well as for reaching a combat level of 100. You're also going to get combat mastery points for defeating an Echo boss, defeating 2 unique Echo bosses, and then finally defeating 3 unique Echo bosses, rounding it out with the final challenge being to complete the Inferno. Now that we have kind of how the system works out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the combat itself and see what we're looking at. Starting off with melee inside of tier 1, your melee hits are going to have a 25% chance to roll damage twice and then take the highest result. The tier 1 range ability will make it to where damage rolls that are beneath 30% of your maximum hit with ranged are increased to 30%. That kind of seems like it's a minimum hit buff there, which might actually be huge. But the tier 1 mage ability is where when you roll above 90% of your max hit with magic, your damage is increased by 50%, with the passive for tier 1 being a 95% chance to save weapon charges, ammunitions, and runes used for spells. So looking at the first tier, I'm going to break down the next tiers a little bit quicker, but just looking at the first tier here, I think this is really nice. You know, you're getting the passive, so even if I don't pick mage, I'm still going to have that passive that's going to save runes for me and ammunition for me. And in a league where you're playing as an Iron Man, this is absolutely massive. But let's go ahead and jump into tier 2 melee, where your melee hits have a 10% chance to generate an echo hit, which is an additional melee hit, which can hit for 50% of your maximum hit and does respect accuracy, so you can hit 0. They do point out that this is going to only work inside of PVM. The tier 2 ranged relic, I'm going to start calling these, makes it to where each subsequent range attack has its maximum hit increased by an additional 5% after 20%. And then the tier 2 for magic is going to make it to where your magic max hit is increased by 5% per tick in between your attacks up to 40%. Magic actually coming in really strong with some of the abilities here, some of the relics. That's crazy. The passive here in tier 2 is going to make it to where healing from all sources is increased by 20%. You pair that with the sunlit gloves and you're looking at some pretty hefty sharks. But let's go ahead and jump into the tier 3 for melee, where it's going to make your attack rate set to 80% rounding down. And this is actually the same for tier 3 all the way across the board. Range attack rate is going to be set to 80% rounding down. And then magic attack rate is going to be set to 80% rounding down. So you're going to be casting spells, hitting people with your swords, and shooting arrows a whole lot faster than normal. But the passive for tier 3 also increases your accuracy with all styles by 100%. So they are really ramping up the power here inside of this league. Let's go ahead and jump into tier 4 for melee. Your hits will have a 5% chance to heal 40% of the damage dealt. So you're looking at a constant set of Guthans here. That's actually massive. Tier 4 for range is going to make every 5th range hit heal 5 points. And then tier 4 for magic is going to make it to where if you roll above 90% of your magic max hit, you're going to heal 10% of the damage dealt. So we got some healing coming in across the board here inside of tier 4, with the passive being damage taken is reduced by 15%. Jumping into the tier 5 for melee, your attack rate is going to be set to 50%, which is going to get rounded down for above 5-tick weapons and rounded up for below 4-tick weapons. And this is the same across the board. So they're just increasing your speed again here in tier 5 with the passive being prayer gain from all sources is increased by 25%. Then finally, we move on into the final tier. Starting off with melee, they say that your chance to generate a melee echo increases to 20%, and your echo can generate additional echoes up to 8 times in a row. For ranged, we're looking at never missing with ranged inside of PVM. And then for magic, they're saying that your maximum hit with magic is going to be increased by 1% for every 100 hit points remaining on the target, up to 10%. On a successful magic hit, if your target has less hit points than your maximum hit, you're gonna max hit. And then the passive for tier 6 makes it to where attacks with all styles now have 60% prayer penetration. So you pull a tier 6 inside of PvP, because it doesn't say PVM only, and you're gonna be hitting through people's prayers. That's gonna be an absolute nightmare. But any sort of bosses that make you weapon swap because they're using prayer, you may be able to, you know, sidestep that, especially with all of the extra power that you're getting from all of these other tiers of combat masteries, if you will. One thing I want to point out is it doesn't look like you're entirely locked into getting just one combat mastery. If we take a look here, there's 6 tiers of combat mastery, meaning that you could fully max out one and then get another one all the way up to tier 4. So when it comes to account building inside of this league, the variety is going to be like none we've ever seen before. You know, you could actually buff up all 3 of your combat styles by getting ranged up to tier 4 and then putting magic and melee up to tier 3. There's a lot that can go on here, and definitely opens up the theory crafting. Keep an eye out on the channel, because I will most definitely be putting out a finalized combat selection choice sometime today. But that's all I wanted to break down. Let me know what you guys are thinking down in the comments and what route you guys think you're going to take. But that's all I wanted to break down inside of this video. I hope you guys have an amazing day. I'm out.